Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm getting to test ride the Orbea Wild FS and I'm very excited. In a previous video I got to test ride the Orbea Rise and I loved it. So I'm really excited about this because it's a meatier bike, and thanks to Bikeology again for the lend of the bike for the test ride. This bike is a 29er. It is heavy enough at 22 kilos I think average, but it has a massive battery at 625 watt, powered by the Bosch CX Generation 4 motor. So I should be zooming up that hill ahead of everybody else. Other than that, it has pretty good specs on it. It is a 36 Fox float performance, 160 on the front, and then again Fox on the back, 160 as well, and it's a DPS shock. On this bike we have a Michelin on the front and a Maxxis Assegai on the back, but it comes as standard I think with the Maxxis on both, DHF on the front and a DHR2 on the back. And aluminium frame, 29er. Let's get it out on the trail and try it out, and I can fill you in on the rest. This Wild FS is a size large, and I was definitely out of my comfort zone as my feet would barely touch the ground with the saddle all the way down. So I did find it a bit hard to stay loose on the bike. I suppose because of the size of the frame it was more difficult for me to move around it. I stuck to trails I knew well, which definitely helped. But saying all that, I had so much fun and I loved this bike so much I cannot tell you. Imagine if I test rode a small medium, I probably wouldn't have given it back. There are a total of 8 models available for the Wild FS. These range from the top end M Limited at just over €9,100 to the H30, which comes in at €4,500. You can get the Mayo customization on the M Limited, the M Team and the M10. On my new bike video you can check out the Mayo customization, but basically you get to pick your own frame colour, whether it's a matte or gloss finish, and also the colour of the graphics. Orbea have completely revamped the geometry of this bike. It has a longer cockpit which gives you room to move, a slacker head angle for more stability, lower bottom bracket for improving cornering, and a longer wheelbase which helps stability at high speeds. Personally, I loved the geometry of this bike and it made me feel stable even on more technical trails. Sizes available in the Wild are the same as the Rallon and are small/medium, large or extra large. The reach is roughly the same as the Rallon, and even though my Rallon is a small medium and this is a large, I think this is probably one of the reasons I love this bike so much. The travel on the Wild is 160 on the front and 160 on the rear, and regardless of the trails or drops that I encountered, it felt so smooth. This Wild is a 2020 H10 model and is a Fox Float Performance 36 fork and a DPS shock, with the 2021 model coming with a Fox Float Performance 38 and a DPX2 shock. Even with the 36 and the DPS, I found this bike to be super plush and planted in the rough sections. This bike came stock with Shimano XT brakes, which are the same as on my Rallon, and I really like these brakes because the levers are comfortable to use with one finger and they give you tons of stopping power, which is important for a heavier e-bike. The handlebars are 780mm, where I normally ride 740mm, but obviously if this bike was mine, I'd be getting out the hacksaw. The Wild FS came with a Minion DHF 2.6 up front and a DHR2 on the rear, which is what I have on my Rallon. But this bike that I'm riding here has a Michelin Wild Enduro 2.4 up front and a Maxxis Assegai on the rear. And I'd love to have tried this bike with a Michelin E-Wild 2.6 tyre on the front because it's a super grippy e-bike specific tyre. This bike has a Bosch Generation 4 motor, which is really quiet and generates 75 Newton meters of torque, and allowed me to bomb up the steep hills at 18 kilometers an hour that I barely would have been able to walk up normally. The 625 watt-hour battery provided me with enough charge to spend 4 hours on the bike with 2 bars still remaining on the battery at the end of the day. I suppose this would be about 25% left, which is pretty good considering this is a demo bike from last year. I couldn't believe on this particularly sloppy uphill section how well the bike allowed me to get through the muck with little or no effort from myself, bearing in mind that I struggle getting up this section in the dry on the rallon. So some people are probably wondering, will I now be selling my rallon and going to buy a Wild FS? Hell no, I love my rallon way too much. But if I was committing to buying an e-bike, I have to say that the Wild FS would be very high on my list. Another question I've been asked many times is, will you still get a workout on an e-bike? And I would say most definitely. You are not going to be as tired at the top of the hill as you would be on your normal mountain bike, but this means you have way more energy for the fun downhill sections. And is that not what mountain biking is all about? I found that I ended up riding much more trails than I would have on a day out on the rallon, and because I was less tired, I felt that I was less likely to make as many mistakes. After testing both the Orbea Rise and the Orbea Wild FS, you may want to know which I preferred. It's a tough one because I had so much fun on both. They are both very different bikes. It all comes down to your preference of the style of riding that you want to do. If you want a bike that feels like a normal bike and do mostly trail riding, a bike that feels so playful you forget you're on an e-bike, then the Rise would be a good option. If you want a bike that's like a bulldozer and will plough over almost anything, including bigger drops, jumps and downhill sections, and want to get back to the top of the hill as fast as possible and do it all again, and you're okay with a heavier bike, then the Wild FS is probably a better choice. If I had to pick one, the Wild would swing it for me, because it's more what I want from an e-bike. If you want to see how my test ride went on the Orbea Rise, check out my previous video. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. I've really enjoyed doing these test rides, and hopefully you enjoyed them too. If you have any comments or questions, leave them below and I'll get back to you. And if you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button because I'd really appreciate the support. Hopefully I will see you again in the next video. Thanks again and take care of yourselves.